no, they got Johnson.
The door is open. Everyone should move through now. I can't guarantee that it
There
won't
is
lock
no
again when it
everyone,
closes.
Cortana. They're all dead. Wait a minute.
Use your help, sir.
I know that voice. Don't worry everyone, it seems Johnson has plot armor, so... Never mind. Halo 1, or more accurately, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition, because you know, with that Combat Evolved in the title, they're basically pointing at FPS classics like Doom, Quake and Duke Nukem from the 90s and saying, you're good, but this is a new millennium, and I could do one better. And they weren't messing around. Just as those games had been genre defining for their decade, for first-person shooters, Halo became a milestone of the genre for the noise. That is, before a little game series called Call of Duty, which had coexisted alongside Halo for years and decided to trip Halo up just before the finish line, and usher in the era of millennials screaming down mics at you because you suck, mate, with your lack of 360-degree no-scoping. Reminiscing about the fall or rise of the gaming industry, depending on who you ask, in the late noughties aside, with Halo's Anniversary Edition that released a decade after the original, and then included in the Master Chief Collection, Halo of 2001 was meant to be a game that mixed the classic corridor shooters of years past with more open areas and vehicles now possible with the new hardware at the time. It no doubt marked a clear expansion of the FPS concept at the time, and with a distinct sci-fi setting to back it up, obviously it was a success in founding this substantial franchise. As for my experience with the game and Halo in general, I played Halo Infinite before this game and had not played Halo before 2022, as clearly I had been living under a rock regarding pop culture phenomena of the last 2 decades. And no, I have not watched the TV series, as I am in the UK and it is not available here, and thankfully I played those games before that controversial piece of media came to dominate all Halo discussion on the internet. Seriously, it's the only thing that comes up if you search Halo. Otherwise, let's load our M90 shotgun, hop in our Warthog, and get to work. Regarding Halo 1's combat system, its gunplay is simple to understand, but finds its nuance with the different weapons this sci-fi setting offers, and with a 2-gun limit it encourages you to try a variety of weapons, as is the case with the whole series of Halo. What is interesting regarding the weapons available and the gunplay is much of what I said in my Halo Infinite video applies here, as many of the guns here ended up making the cut in every game up to Infinite. So the classics I mentioned, such as the Needler, the UNSC shotgun, its anti-material rifle, plasma rifles, the plasma pistol, the Magnum, all start here, and they are as fun to use here as they are in Infinite. Add to that the fact that Chief excels at the trademark jumping around like a crazy person and keeping mobile and hitting enemies with the butt of the rifle when needed, or in my case it is the win condition of every engagement. You end up with a well-rounded combat system with a mini loop in the gameplay based on grabbing new weapons on the fly as ammo depletes, and it works really well here. That is, I think it is a testament to good gameplay design when the basic ideas of this game set down and 20 years later it continues. So you have the weapon variety, you have that 2-weapon limit, you have the ease of movement, you have the shielding, and all end up travelling through every iteration of this series to the present. Hence, there is a reason it's stuck, and I could see why here as it gels so well together. That said, one thing I wish they had kept from this game is the health system, which becomes a regenerating health system in Fallout games, and to be fair was what happened at the time with most games in the whole industry. As here, Chief has more health than in every other game, but doesn't regenerate and requires medkits. It makes Chief tougher and means if you're playing well you can afford in tough fights to be a bit more reckless, as you know you can fall back on a decent health bar. But since it doesn't regen, you've got to be careful. Not a major criticism of the Fallout games, but I thought I would note it because I did notice it as I was playing that I appreciated having that health bar, as it does build up tension more than having a regenerating health and hiding behind cover. Okay, run back in here. What are you gonna do now, punks? No. Still worth it. The vehicle sections. A staple of the Halo series, and these weapons of vehicular destruction that are iconic to the series all started here, with all the mad physics, the sliding vehicles, and inevitably getting stuck in terrain. As a side note, I always find it curious that other FPS games that followed Halo 1 didn't commit more to vehicle sections and instead focused solely on on-foot combat. Not that they didn't have them occasionally, but none committed to the idea as much as Halo did as part of its game design. That said, vehicles here, though they do love to treat all forms of terrain like ice for some reason, this sliding, or should we call it drifting, the drifting and having Marines shooting while Chief shows why he would never be able to get a driver's license as he proceeds to knock down every alien pedestrian he can see, and sometimes poor Marines. It does a good job of acting as a breather between the high-intensity gunfights on foot that make up the majority of the game, with a fun and, dare I say, relaxed experience. That is, if counting how many elites you can run over is to be considered relaxing.
There, in the cliff wall. I'll bet the silent cartographer is somewhere inside that facility.
Come here! My warthog will taste alien flesh. Also, what's with all the space Aussies? That said, I won't dwell on this too long, as the vehicles are here, they are great to use, if a bit unwieldy, and we will have more to say about them as we progress through the series, as following this game they become something of a key set-piece section of every game, though we do see elements of that towards the end of this game.
Ship's inventory shows one longsword fighter is still docked in Launch Bay 7. If we move now, we can make it.
This course might be so simple that a toddler could navigate it, but damn if that soundtrack doesn't sound good. As the first entry in the series and the proverbial shot in the dark by Bungie at the time, they had to lay the groundwork for the possibility of future games, as sci-fi is a genre where a story relies heavily on the universe and its world building. In that regard, if you want to know it was successful, you only need to look at the many games that preceded it and its iconic images associated with those games to know that it did at least something right. Consider this, even before playing any Halo game, I still was interested enough in the world to actively read its lore from time to time, such as what makes the Covenant tick, what is the UNSC, why has every major space-based RTS or RPG I've played in the last 20 years had a ton of mods and overhauls that imitate this series. It seems to me that it's the story, the characters and the world building, the lore, that inspired enough people to convert the various aspects of its world into other settings in games, as they were so enjoyed, and it says a lot about it and the longevity of this series. Whether it's the Covenant's fanatical spiritualism indicated by the comments of its soldiers, the naming conventions of their ships, the design of their weapons and ships, forgoing practical designs for elegant and colourful aesthetics, and the strict caste system between the various races and their personalities. Yet it is clearly in opposition to the UNSC in this game, whose pragmatic and militarism is reflected in its attitude, its design principles being different and seemingly opposed to the Covenant's principles. These things that at first glance seem like designs for fun gameplay, which they can be, actually work wonders to build up this game and this franchise's mythos, its lore, even from its first moments in a subtle manner. It creates clear categories of things that are easy to understand for new players, but also hint at the wider aspects of this universe that are to be explored both in this game, but in the future the door has already been opened for that exploration of ideas, as you will see when I discuss the Covenant in particular in the second game. It is with the firm foundation of this world building lore that the story found its footing here. That is, the game's core plot is a simple one, but effective, but cleverly branches out part-way through the story with some twists that keep the story interesting, expand on character interactions, and explore the world building even further with that. That said, for a basic synopsis of the story, for those who are interested, it is, as expected, about finding out about what the Halo Ring installation, number 4 in this case, is for. It's presumed to be a weapon, which is not wrong, but there is much more to it, as the pragmatic UNSC want to secure it, while the Covenant sees the ring as sacred and believe it is essential to their own religious journey. Yet all parties are kept in the dark as to the true nature of the ring until it can deliver a satisfying revelation. That is, what I thought would be a simple story has far more to it, and not just in the exposition, but with the plot threads it sets up for the rest of the series. That said, it is not a personal story, as some of the other titles would be, at least not yet, but given it is the first in the series, it would have been risky to lean too heavily on connecting with characters we surely need more time to explore at this early stage in the series. Hence, taking this as a foundational story for the series, it does hold up well.
The Covenant believe that what they call the Silent Cartographer is somewhere under this island. The Cartographer is a map room that will lead us to Halo's control center. The island has multiple structures and installations. One of them contains the map room.
We're approaching the LZ. It's gonna be hot. Get set to come out swinging. Touchdown, hit it, Marines!
Halo, as a nearly 20-year-old game with a remaster to its name from 2011, making it still a decade-old experience, would normally mean I would have to either decide to cover just the remaster or the original game for clarity. However, thankfully in this game I can talk about a bit of both, as brilliantly this game does have a button that you can click which will allow you to switch between the old and new versions of the game on the fly, and also gives you the ability and the options to choose your preferred HUD, which I think that deserves mentioning. That is, this game still holds up well graphics wise, with more polygons and meshes, more detailed faces, redone audio, effects, and basically everything you can think of. It is a surprising treat to behold even in 2022 when I have played it. At the same time, you have the iconic soundtrack by Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore, as I mentioned in my Halo Infinite video, granting this soundtrack Hall of Fame status for just how memorable it is, both epic but also more light-hearted and dark in tone when required, of the various levels and story moments. I don't think I need to say more, as you've already been listening to this brilliant soundtrack in the background of this video the whole time, so I'll leave it at that. As for the other presentation elements in this game, I think the best way to illustrate it and discuss it is to discuss one of the more iconic levels, and arguably one of the most iconic levels in gaming history. For those who don't want spoilers, I will separate a deeper discussion on this for its own presentation section next, as noted in the video timestamps. Basic non-spoiler overview is that the scene I speak of has a mix of great timing, tone shifts, some great lighting, level design, with a structure of scenes and moments that bring together everything pitch perfect in a concert of which Bungie's entire development team and the composers has resulted in a phenomenal level, and perhaps my favourite one in the series. Otherwise, I think it shows how this game's great presentation work even today can come together so well and feeds into the all-important world building, in particular with the level I speak of. Normally I don't do an actual spoiler discussion for presentation, but for those who have no qualms with spoilers or simply knew the level of which I speak of in the previous section, it was of course the Flood level. This level is a tour de force for presentation and level design that gels perfectly with the gameplay style and the story in this game. Before I go further, I think it is only fair to at least show this iconic scene, or at least parts of the level, and illustrate my points from there.
Transmission from the captain's dropship was from this area. That was over 12 hours ago. When you locate Captain Keyes, radio in, and I'll come pick you up.
not turning me into one of those things! I'll blow your brains out! Get away from me! Ah! Ah! Don't touch me, you freak! I won't be like you, I'll die first! Find your own hiding place, the monsters are everywhere! Play dead! That's what I did. Play dead. They took the live ones. Oh God, I can still hear them. Monsters! Ah! 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 Just leave me alone! Sarge?
With this first section, we see Chief's arrival, and him slowly progressing without Cortana, as he slowly then discovers what's going on. This is a case where having Chief not speak or make quips works well, as it is just Chief, us, and the environment speaking to us. The little radio recordings you hear, the panic of the Covenant, the signs of battle, desperation throughout, and a set of musical theme changes to match, as well as a brilliant piece with a Marine who has snapped and is delusional, ranting and raving and even shooting at Chief, and then Chief seeing finally a suspiciously quiet room.
LZ looks clear. I'm bringing us down.
Go, go, go! Stay close, Jenkins. Mendoza, move it up! Wait here for the captain and his squad, then get your ass inside.
Sir!
Okay, let's move!
Which is weird, right? I mean, look at it. Something scrambled the insides.
What's that? Plasma scoring?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there was an accident, you know, friendly fire or something?
What do we have, Sergeant? Looks like a Covenant patrol. Badass elite units. All KIA.
Real pretty. Friend of yours?
Nah, we just met.
Right, well, let's get this door open.
I'll try, sir. But it looks like these Covenant worked pretty hard to lock it down.
Just do it, son.
Yes, sir. Got a bad feeling about this.
Boy, you always got a bad feeling about something.
Sarge, can you hear me?
What's going on, soldier?
We've got contact. Lots of them. But they're not Covenant. They're just tearing through us. What's the flow? No!
Corporal, do you copy? Over! Mendoza, get your ass back up to second squad's position and find out what the hell is going on.
But-
I don't have time for your lip, soldier. I gave you an order.
Sarge! Listen!
What is that? Where's that coming from, Mendoza?
I don't... There! Get out!
Hold still! Hold still! Let him have it!
Think about it, Marine. Take it!
Next we have this lengthy cutscene section, which I cut a few bits out to reduce the length, but I ended up keeping most of it due to how relevant it was for my next few points. This shift from Chief's point of view to that of a Marine, seeing what was happening with Johnson, Keyes, and then seeing how these committed soldiers in their haste failed to see the warnings of the Covenant, with the UNSC undoing the Covenant's attempts to contain the threat they had faced before, with the climax of the Flood bursting forth as an numberless, unstoppable horde, as we see how powerless the Covenant and the UNSC are against this threat.
Sir, thank God you're here. We've been lost out here for hours. After we lost contact with the rest of the mission, we headed for the RV point, and then these things, they ambushed us. We gotta get out of here.
There's a large tower a few hundred meters from your current position. Find a way above the fog and foliage canopy and I can move in and pick you up.
Finally, we are returned to Chief's point of view as he begins to fight this horde, which is like a slowly moving wrecking ball that you feel cannot be stopped and only slowed as Chief's discipline and mobility become key to his survival. In terms of design, having this claustrophobic area with flood that chase Chief from room to room, swarming the Covenant and the UNSC positions, it creates tension as Chief dashes from area to area in what feels like a maze, and his exit path diverges from the entry route, helping to build panic, as I found myself getting lost a little each time I played this. But when you reach the final elevator, you feel relief as Carol Rowley makes contact over comms and you meet a group of Marines. Then with a shift to a more upbeat theme with the open air and the salvation ahead, you rush through a murky swamp full of the flood, with hope gradually slipping away as Marines are dragged into the dirt, and only then are you saved by an unknown actor. I think those clips speak for themselves, as the great mixture of ideas and presentation elements do come together here, and I can say that this level will remain one of my most memorable levels in gaming that I have had the pleasure to experience, as I did not expect a first-person shooter to have such a brilliant example of sublime presentation, and not at the expense of gameplay principles, or making the player feel like they are stuck on rails for half an hour.
Greetings, I am the monitor of Installation 04. I am 343 Guilty Spark. Someone has released the flood. My function is to prevent it from leaving this installation, but I require your assistance. Come, this way.
Chief, I've lost your signal! Where'd you go? Chief! Chief!
Halo 1 being from the sacred time before patches after the fact became the standard of the video games industry, lacks major issues or bugs to speak of, and its performance has no issues running with my current system being a 2060 Super GPU and a 10th generation i5 processor. That said, there are two issues I did have with the game that, as it happens, go hand in hand, and that is regarding the game's difficulty and the save checkpoint system seen in this game. You see, about 2/3 through the game, it has a substantial difficulty spike that it never fully recovers from. Since this is a non-spoiler section, I will watch what I say here, but for those familiar with the game, I will simply say the library is where this issue starts, which even before I played this game I was aware of this infamous point of the game. That is, in non-spoiler terms, you're faced with a section that introduces an enemy with rockets and shotguns in particular in substantial numbers, and some randomization thrown in, and a level design that makes it difficult to avoid them cutting Master Chief's career short. So at first you will die a lot here, as those two weapons I mentioned are devastating to Chief, with rockets usually being a one-shot kill on a direct hit. Yet this wouldn't be so bad if not for the strange checkpoint system for saving in this game, as it is very inconsistent, and in my first playthrough of this level I wasn't getting any of the expected checkpoints when I should have. That is, I would be losing 10 to 20 minutes of attempting this difficult level each time, and it became very frustrating. But here's the kicker: in my follow-up playthroughs I was getting plenty of checkpoints in this level, so I had no issue with it, even though I died more times than I would like. But when you only lose a few minutes with each death, retrying is fine. Otherwise, regarding that enemy type, they will plague you for the rest of the game, and towards the end of the game add in a weird final boss fight section of sorts that can be very finicky, and you have overall a weird difficulty curve in this game, particularly in its latter stages. Not a massive issue, but certainly a notable one, so I thought I would at least mention it. That said, Halo 1 is a relatively smooth experience overall.
Sir? Right. Let's thaw him out.
Okay. Bringing low-level systems online. Cracking the case in 30 seconds. He's hot! Blowing the pins in 5!
At the core of the story of Halo is the duo of Master Chief and Cortana. Starting with the first mission in this game, the majority of the series will see them effectively become one entity, a symbiosis of two of the greatest achievements of humanity's greatest mind, Dr. Halsey. While Chief is the pinnacle of what a physical human body might be designed to achieve, as well as mental conditioning, Cortana is the pinnacle of humanity's technological innovation, and with access to all of humanity's knowledge and the ability to process it, she directs and shows Chief the way forward. For those familiar with the Iliad, Cortana is the Athena to Chief's Diomedes. One is wisdom, knowledge, strategic brilliance, and seemingly beyond mortal comprehension. The other, a champion, a warrior with keen instincts, but also mortal and humane. That's what makes the Chief Cortana dynamic work both for gameplay purposes and also story. They are both brilliant in their own right, but together they can move worlds. In this game, though Chief does not talk as much as he would in later titles, he has the instincts and the grim determination to find a way forward, but without Cortana he loses crucial context and insight, as we see when he foolishly assists Guilty Spark and nearly destroys humanity as well as much of the galaxy. That is, one cannot doubt Chief's commitment, but Cortana is essential for directing Chief's capabilities, as he is still only human, though admittedly superhuman. Likewise for Cortana, by interfacing with Chief, as an AI, she is able to gain valuable insight into humanity from Chief and what it means to be a living, breathing person, to experience the stresses of combat and the physical world, as well as see relieved soldiers face to face through Chief's eyes and senses. They are made stronger by each other, and their friendship is founded around this. One cannot succeed against these odds without the other. That is, in Halo 1 we see the origins of this dynamic, and it does well to drive the plot forward, allows the player to be in the shoes of Chief, with the developers and writers being able to direct gameplay, the story, and give assistance to the player through Cortana and her interactions with Chief. It works well here, and I'm glad they decided to do it this way, and as we go forward we'll see more and more of this throughout the series. Supporting the essential duo, we have the crew of the Pillar of Autumn. Though there are many people Chief crosses paths with from the Autumn, including Marines, pilots, engineers, there are a few recurring crew members that I think deserve discussion here, as they all pertain to the plot and also due to their more fleshed out personalities. Those are Captain Jacob Keyes, Sergeant Avery Johnson, and an honourable mention for Carl Rowley or Foehammer. First, you have Captain Jacob Keyes, who is the ranking officer aboard the Autumn as its captain, and takes a hands-on approach to command. Coordinating with Cortana, they direct all engagements by the UNSC forces on the ring, and their banter can be amusing and shows a great deal of camaraderie and respect between them, but also how the rest of the crew views them, as Keyes may give the general orders, but it is Cortana who he trusts to execute efficiently those orders with her strategic capabilities. That's at the core of Keyes' character here, as a less strict kind of commander who is deeply respected by all and respects all of his crew, including the AI Cortana and Master Chief. That said, he makes mistakes, and in the end it costs him, his crew and his own life, yet even at the end, with the flood attempting to consume his mind, he shows a great sense of will, but more importantly regarding the world building that you see with the archives you can find in the remaster. We get insight into how the flood grave mind attempts to influence and control others in a slow and insidious process, as it attempts to get information it requires, in this case from Keyes, as it tries to break down the individual in that of Jacob Keyes, and he resists with great effort by recalling memories and who he is, much to the flood's frustration, while still doing his part to assist Chief and Cortana in the end.
What did my name? I forgot.
Keyes, Jacob, Captain, service number 01928-19912-JK.
In Sergeant Avery Johnson, you have a foul-mouthed, somewhat cliché Marine drill sergeant type, though no less enjoyable character who assists Chief and Cortana in their tactical engagements from time to time. and is effectively the face and spokesman for the Marines on the ring. In a way, to discuss him is to also discuss the Marines, as it is in his scenes with his interactions with those under his command, we see a deeply humanizing side of the average soldier, as we cannot forget that while Chief was designed and trained from a young age for war as a super soldier, many of these Marines were likely drafted recently, and it is up to Johnson to prepare them for the horror of war. You see, Johnson is technically a proto-Spartan, for those aware of the expanded universe, so he is a cut above the average soldier, and acts like a middle ground between Chief and the soldiers of the UNSC, as they viewed Chief as a larger-than-life war hero, while Johnson, with his dialogue with Chief and Cortana, helps bridge the gap in command. It's a great choice, as it humanizes all involved and makes sense in the circumstances of the crisis they are facing, leading to a cohesive feeling among the UNSC forces. That is, even though this game leaves his fate with a big question mark after the flood outbreak, the ring's destruction, and with Cortana as much as saying that no UNSC survived towards the end of the game, we know this is not the last time we will see of this venerable Marine.
Hit 'em, Marines! Go, go, go! The Corps ain't paying us by the hour!
Stick to the higher ground to the right. We should be able to recon the Covenant position without being spotted. I've detected Covenant stationary guns near the next pass. I recommend using your sniper rifle to take out the gunners while I call for Marine support.
Get ready to move in to support us, Sergeant.
Flying Pelican Echo 419, Carol Rowley, called Fullhammer by Cortana throughout the game, deserves an honourable mention, as even though she is not seen, she can be heard over comms throughout the game, and is the first designated pilot, as I like to call it, in the series, and therefore plays a role in Chief and Cortana's success in this first entry. What I like here is how her interactions with Cortana, though brief, help to humanize Cortana as a character, as along with Johnson and Keyes. They all clearly view Cortana as more than an AI, but someone they are happy to engage in banter with, and someone they trust. Just a small mention, but I found myself becoming fond of this pilot throughout my subsequent playthroughs, and it reminds you that the Spartans and Marines would get nowhere without the dedicated pilots of the UNSC, making her death at the end sad, but certainly earned. And in the future, when Chief mentions losing a lot of good people on Installation 4, he is referring to Rowley, Keyes, the Marines, Johnson, and those who served with him with distinction.
Hold position here.
Cortana to Echo 419. 2 Covenant Banshees are approaching on your 6. Evade. Say again, evade. I'm hit. Mayday! Mayday! Airport under the shot to hell! I can't hold her! I can't hold her!
Echo 419! She's gone. Calculating alternate escape route.
To summarize the place of the UNSC characters in this game, they serve as a great way to ground and humanize the 2 main characters in that of Chief and Cortana, and as we will see throughout the series, they are the foundation of the series and our gateway into a glimpse of humanity in this series, which Chief and Cortana themselves do not see in person, but can garner through these interactions with these great men and women of the UNSC armed forces. With 343 Guilty Spark, we have the introduction to the Forerunners in the Halo series, with this eccentric monitor of Installation 4 being revealed at a crucial moment in the story. That is, Guilty Spark finds themselves being greatly fleshed out also by the archives that you find throughout the game, ranging from discussion of reclaimers, discussion of AI rampancy that not relevant in this game so much but will be relevant later in the series, an unidentified crashed ship on this ring with unknown occupants, information about the original humanity fighting and then finding a cure to counter the flood. Obviously this original humanity was something that was added later on in the series, the idea of a kind of precursor humanity. But also you have general information about the ring, as well as a key section where Captain Keyes, is struggling with the flood. And then also we have 343 meeting the heretics in preparation for Game 2. It is quite the treasure trove, and combined with what we see in the game originally, we can see that the ring with 343 as its monitor was meant to hand the ring over to the reclaimers, that is, humans. It leads nicely into discussions of why would the Forerunners build this to destroy something like the Flood, yet still keep Flood specimens on this ring. This question is pondered in the archives by 343, and is also meant to be pondered throughout the series, even in Halo Infinite, where it resurfaces as an idea. It shows that even though the Forerunners were advanced, had many plans in motion, and ultimately knew their time was up, their creations failed to meet their expectations, and perhaps the Forerunners were as flawed as their creations, full of contradictions between preserving life but being willing to destroy it in a vain attempt to contain the flood that they then still refuse to destroy themselves fully. Of course, much of these little things are a result of the fact that clearly the lore developed over the course of the games, and with the archives being part of the remaster, they are meant to explain more things about Game 2 and 3 and their various plotlines that were not originally fleshed out in this game, for obvious reasons. Before I leave this there is one more thing curious about this, and that is with the third archive you can view, which indicates that 343 noted that the Covenant ship, known as the Truth and Reconciliation, that we board in level 3 of this game, may have had a rogue AI that indicates the Covenant do have their own AIs, though clearly not as essential as they are with the UNSC. It's strange, as given the Covenant's spiritual element, they would seemingly be opposed to such things. And of course, there is little mention of these afterwards, as most AIs they encounter they consider almost to be like deities in the case of the Forerunner monitors, and thus obviously misinterpret what they actually are. With that said, it is interesting how many plot threads are set up by the interactions with 343 and the Forerunner technology we see in this game, and it makes for interesting grounding for the series. It tells us as much about humanity's origins in this universe as it does about the Covenant with their own perception of this reality and the contradictions found within that. Have no fear, we will definitely be coming back to the monitors and the Forerunners throughout this series, as of course this game is meant to lay the groundwork for future titles, but I look forward to discussing the Flood and its interactions with the Forerunners as we proceed.
Factory construct. Your core shows no hint of understanding the gravity of this situation. I will return later for your proper decommissioning. Well, unless the flood kills us all first, in which case the point will be moot. Good day, Construct.
The dichotomy of the UNSC and the Covenant is one of the best aspects of Halo's lore and world building. As I mentioned in the non-spoiler story section, as well as in the presentation section, you have two brilliantly distinct groups that contrast each other, but are ultimately undeniably linked, with their fates intertwined, as one might say. It is interesting that with the UNSC you have a pragmatic militarist humanity that ultimately is deeply flawed in its treatment of its own people, as you find in the expanded lore, but has found purpose in its war of survival with the Covenant. And as we find out both in this game and reinforced in the future, this is actually humankind's second attempt at galactic civilization, even though they don't know it at this point, and that their path was more directed than they know by the Forerunners. On the other hand, you have the fanatical and zealous spiritualists of the multi-species empire known as the Covenant, who idealize the Forerunners almost as gods and are desperate to be the chosen people and seek to eradicate humanity for what they perceive as the profane desecration of their holy sites. Of course, for those who pay attention, particularly in Game 2 onwards, it seems some of the Covenant know that their religion is in fact a lie, and that humanity is actually an existential and spiritual threat to them, as their Covenant was denied the Forerunners' legacy from the start, a legacy that they want for themselves. Obviously, the average Covenant grunt or elite doesn't know any of this, but it is telling that while one side believes it is fighting to achieve the legacy that they think they are owed in that of the Covenant, the other side, who seek survival, are being scorned for not seizing the legacy that they didn't even know was theirs, in the case of humanity. Yet for those familiar with dialectics, you will know that this confrontation of ideologies that starts in Halo 1 will shape both groups going forward, as both realise the truth and both are changed by their confrontation, while all the while Chief and Cortana simply want to finish the fight. That's the point of the development of civilization. It goes beyond individuals, no matter how successful they might be. Our heroes might prevent annihilation, but they can't prevent the paradigm shifts and the unpredictable consequences that arise within the Covenant and the UNSC, as well as the wider galaxy. That said, with this game it is, as always, just the foundation and origins of these ideas, and with Game 2 in particular, I do look forward to discussing it in greater detail, as for those who know, there is far more interaction with the Covenant and how they function, as well as their leadership, which leads to a lot of intrigue and interesting little discussions surrounding that. Having now played the game multiple times through, I feel I can grasp why it obtained its legendary status among sci-fi and first-person shooter games. It's a shame I didn't play it earlier, and obviously it was on PC, so I could have at the time, but with its follow-ups going to the Xbox originally back in the day, and me having a PlayStation and a PC, I shied away from it. The thing is, if this game was simply taken on its own, it would be a good sci-fi shooter game with fun vehicle sections mixed in. But with the hindsight of playing the rest of the series, it takes on more meaning, as when considering any foundational work in a franchise or series, knowing what happened grants clarity to as what decisions were correct, what design principles defined that series, and therefore elevates the importance of that founding game. Halo Combat Evolved, with its brilliant remaster, to my mind functions superbly when you played at least its follow-up title in Halo 2. And really, to fully understand it as a classic, the status of its sequel and how the way it developed consolidates that classic label, as you will see when I cover Halo 2, I feel you cannot have one without the other, and the fact that they both saw equally impressive remasters is a textbook case on how to do remasters, but also emphasises how good this game and its sequel were. Regardless, I look forward to covering a variety of other shooters and sci-fi games that followed out with the Halo franchise to see how this classic defined a decade of gaming before the rise of Call of Duty 4, and I'll also doubtless be making comparisons with the original set of Call of Duty games that were released throughout the decade of Halo's zenith, and see what they shared in common. There is more that I could say regarding my thoughts on Halo 1, but I think I will save them for when I conclude Halo 2, because it will make more sense at that point, the various things I'm going to say. Otherwise, just know it is a great game regardless, on its own merits, but it is even more so with the sequel. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I loved playing and covering this game. It is a classic without a doubt, and I shall be continuing my Halo coverage in the future, so feel free to like, comment and subscribe to make sure that you're notified when I cover those games. Otherwise, have a great day and thanks for watching.
Halo, it's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.